A Twin Cities sheriff is talking about it. It's something we've talked about on this show, but I think a lot of people are scared to discuss it.
Now shut up and drive.
We have a gang problem in the Twin Cities, and right now the main gang activity is centered in the Somali community. Young Somali people who are making trouble. Sheriff came on today to talk about the increase in gang activity. Perhaps you've seen some of the video from over the weekend. There have been a number of shootings in the Twin Cities, in the suburbs, in northeast Minneapolis and north Minneapolis. There was a murder this weekend. We cannot let political correctness stop us from addressing a real issue in the community, and that's what the sheriff was bringing up. Is the sheriff right? Are we worried about being too PC? And is that making the Twin Cities less safe? I think it is, and I think we can do something that is difficult. We can talk about a gang problem in one group in the Twin Cities without being racist about it. Here are a couple of the comments. I want to play a couple of the comments, and I welcome your input at 651-461-9226. This is Sheriff Bob Fletcher, who was on with Vanita this morning. So first, I want you to hear him talk about how many young people were concerned about, because to me, it's a lot. It's a lot of young people, and also it's a small number of people in general.
There's 100,000 Somali people in Minnesota, and we're really targeting 300. You know, it's 300 young youth that are misguided and need some redirection and correction and accountability. To be honest with you, putting some of them in jail is a part of the solution.
I think that's right. We have had more kind of, I don't want to say soft approach, but we've struggled with putting young people in jail. And look, I don't think anybody believes that a good long-term solution for a 14, 15, 16-year-old is a 20 or 30-year prison sentence. But people got to get locked up, right? There's been this local wave of violence, and it's okay to talk about it, right? I think it's okay to talk about it. And Bob Fletcher has some credibility here in Ramsey County, in St. Paul. He has been actively working with the Somali community, so he's not coming at this from kind of the perspective that some of the Facebook crime group warriors kind of come from. I thought this statement was very interesting when he was on with Vanita this morning, because I do think this statement, I want you guys to listen to it and react to it at 651-461-9226, because I do think that our Midwestern Minnesota kindness does have us censoring what we would say if this were gangs in North Minneapolis, if this were 20 years ago when we had problems with Hmong gangs in this community, if it was 30 years ago when it was Latino gangs. Here is what Sheriff Fletcher said about the situation with Somali gangs right now.
The ICE surge and all the other things going on have prevented us from actually talking about this problem. And I, in good conscience, just couldn't continue to pretend that it wasn't a problem.
I think the sheriff is spot on. There is a fraudulence, and I choose that word intentionally, but there is a fraudulence in seeing all these social media videos where you see what's going on and who's involved, and then this unwillingness to just say what the reality is. Part of the reason that we got an out-of-control fraud problem in the state of Minnesota is that people were too afraid to just be honest about what was going on. In the state government, people were too afraid to say, this seems like BS. This seems unbelievable. And why was there fear? Because they were afraid they were going to be called racist. Was that fear well-founded? Yes, they were sued by the white lady who was running the whole thing. They were sued and accused of being racist. I do think there has to be a way for people who are fair, who are good, well-intentioned, non-racist people to discuss what is a real issue. And right now, if you believe the sheriff's numbers, we got 300 or so young Somali kids who need some consequences if they're breaking the law. And I think our fear is holding us back. So we can talk about things. 651-461-9226. One texter, lock them up or deport them. So I will point out that despite the rhetoric from the president, the rhetoric from Tom Emmer, the rhetoric from the Republican Party that has decided that Somali Minnesotans are sort of the shorthand kind of political pawn when you want to talk about fraud, when you want to talk about illegal immigration. But the facts are that most Somalis in Minnesota are citizens. Most were born here. And certainly if you're talking about young people who are involved in gangs, I would wager that almost all of these folks are second generation straight up Americans. So that's the type of discussion about this that, frankly, it allows liberals to just say, it's all racist. It's all racist. It's not racist to discuss that. We've talked about these gang issues as a community, and gangs are generally people of the same ethnicity or race. It's just the reality. It's a gang. You're hanging out with your people. I think it's all right to name it. A texter saying, thank you for talking about this issue. It's not racist when you're just being honest and transparent. I do think the way the sheriff talked about it is right. There are 100,000 people in this community. You cannot say in the Somali Minnesota community, you cannot look at that whole group and be like, it's a bunch of fraudsters and it's a bunch of gangbangers. No, absolutely not. But not talking about it, what good does that do? What good does that do? What has that done for us? Nothing. And so we can talk about it. Now, does it mean that every time there's a crime, you have to say Somali murder? No. And if that's your approach, think hard about why you feel that's important, right? But when we're talking about a trend, I think it's okay. Not I think it's okay. It is okay to talk about the trend, talk about what's going on. And in fact, it's necessary to talk about. Lots of texts coming in at 651-461-9226. When citizens take being PC too far as to insist on not demanding accountability by others, not following the law, and harming others, that is a huge problem. It has nothing to do with racism. If you do bad things, no matter who you are, you need to pay the price. I'm tired of the racism excuse and allowing bad things to go unpunished. I do think that consequences have to be a part of the equation. And we cannot allow our community to fall into a lawless situation. And every summer, we're always a little bit on the precipice of that, right? You always feel that moment as the temperatures heat up, the nights get longer, the grudges get angrier, and you see more shootings and more violence. And it's okay to talk about it. And frankly, I do think that there's an opportunity here for our Somali business owners, for our elected officials to also step up and be a voice about this and talk about the fact that like we need to do a better job. We need to get these young people and get these gangs under control. And I think if you had a group of gang members in Uptown who are white, you would expect the city council member for that area to stand up and say something. And I think that I'm curious to see who's going to seize this opportunity to step forward and try to help do the right thing. We saw this with fraud when there was the former Department of Justice guy who wrote a story, I think, for the Independent, talking about some of the cultural issues in his own community. And he came on our show, and I thought it was very helpful. Texters pointing out that in 2022, remember, we had the fireworks sort of chaos. Michael Rainville, the city council member, said, rightly, says this texter, he was going to the mosque to talk to the imams. And they turned that into like he's a huge racist, but really, like, that's the reasonable thing to do. Now, hopefully, Sheriff Fletcher stepping up and talking about this is going to kind of clear the way to dealing with the problem. And Texter, another thing, if you listen, and you should check out the podcast, the whole interview with Sheriff Fletcher and Benita, but saying that the imams want to help steer the moms want to help steer their children in the right direction for their own good, which I think is right. I don't want to see our political correctness and our fear of being called racist keeping us from addressing a real safety issue in our community.